1, 2, 3, This is Amari Purple Talk. Yes. Welcome to episode 90 of Amari Purple Talk, a podcast where I share my thoughts on the Prince musical singularity. I'm Richard Cole, Imaginationist, comic book myth builder, and the Vic Sage of Funk. Thank you once again for tuning in. Please leave your comments in the comment section below, and please download on your favorite podcast platform. If you're listening on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And continue to send your questions or topic suggestions for Amari Purple Talk. And how you can do that is by clicking the link in the show notes below, either the website link for Amari Communications or by following me on Twitter at RichardCole_now, using the hashtag Amari Purple Talk, and your topic or question might just be read in a future episode. And with that out of the way, let's get it started. All right. So, finally, the moment you've all been waiting for. The non-spoiler review of Prince and the Parade Sign of the Times era studio sessions 1985 to 1986. Written by Duane Tudhal. And special thanks to Duane and the publishers of Rowna and Littlefield for providing me with an advanced copy of the book. Thank you very, very much. And the book is scheduled for release on June 10th. You can pre-order a copy. Visit Duane Tudhal's website. That's DuaneTudhal.com. I have a link in the show notes in the episode, so you can click on that. Order a copy. There is a free download of Chapter 1 that is still available. But if you don't want any spoilers, then you can pre-order a signed copy, or you can just pre-order the book. Either way, but this is definitely a non-spoiler review. So here we go. So if you don't want anything spoiled, this is the episode for you. All right, so a lot of us, of course, we know a lot of the stories, but what Duane has done through his research, he's provided a lot of additional details that may be revelations and that may put a lot into perspective for us. Where the previous book, the Purple Rain era sessions, to me, that was more like Star Wars: A New Hope. This book, the Parade Sign of the Times era sessions, is definitely the Empire Strikes Back equivalent. I know when this book was first announced, I was heavily excited for it. And I mean, I enjoyed the first volume, and that volume covered a lot about the Purple Rain era, a lot of the vault tracks and, the makings of Purple Rain and, just how it all came together. But as a Prince fan, for me, the Parade and Sign of the Times era, to me, I enjoyed that more than the Purple Rain era. Of course, I enjoyed everything prior to Purple Rain. And don't get me wrong, I enjoyed Purple Rain a lot. But for me, where, Parade was the next step up, Sign of the Times was the next step up from that, as far as, musical evolution. This was the book I was excited to read. Because I knew, like I said, we know a lot of the stories. A lot of them are legendary. But just like the Purple Rain era, This book, it puts a lot of things in context, puts it in perspective, deals with just the facts. The research is well done. And this one, to me, even goes further than the previous book. Not just because of the magnitude of just the albums, but what was going on around that time. You're winding down from the Purple Rain tour at this point. You're still working on Protege albums. You still got the Family's album that had to come out in 85. Sheila E.'s second album had to come out in 85. This is while Purple Rain is still going on. And in the midst of that, there's plans for Under the Cherry Moon, the movie. Then you got to do a soundtrack for that. And, I know within a few days of reading it, I was like around the month of July. And I thought like, oh man, this is a great, exciting book. Whew, okay, I'm in July. I'm halfway through. I got to get to December and then I can finish. And then it just hit me that, wait a minute, I'm only on July of 1985. So again, just what was going on during that time, it's so heavy. And to cover that in just a 2-year span is absolutely amazing. I mean, there are books that document studio recordings of the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix. I have a book about Stevie Wonder's recording sessions. And those are great books to have, if you're a musician or if you're sort of that deep, record music collector, and it's like, yeah, you may not be a musician, but you're fascinated with the recording process. Those are great books. And even some of those books, they have nice little anecdotes based on what happened in the studio that day. And it's limited to actually what happened in the studio. But the Parade Sign of the Times era sessions, I think it raises the bar because this is Prince. We've had various biographies that paint a picture, but unlike some of the other artists I just mentioned, they were more of an open book. So you can get away with doing a biography, and doing a book about their studio sessions is just icing on the cake, for if you're a fan of those artists. But with Prince, we have that mystique. And, the only way to really know who Prince was through the music. He's pronounced that millions of times in interviews or in attempts to get him to talk about who he is. And the only way to do that was through the music. And this book, it definitely raises the bar because it utilizes what was happening in the studio and the songs created. And not only what was going on inside of the studio, but the things that led to the inspiration of a certain song or two, or major events that, again, we've heard the stories, we've heard the legends, but now we get it in its proper perspective. I mean, it's an amazing amount of work that was done. And on any given day in that book, what was fascinating to me is, I can read something that says, April 5th, 1985, and a certain song was created on that day. And it's like, man, the week before he did, 3 amazing songs, and then 2 more for, that one ended up on Sheila E.'s album. That one ended up on the Family album. Or, now he's snuck into the other studio across the hall, and now he's doing this for Maserati now. And it's like, what was I doing on April 5th of 1985? I can tell you I wasn't really doing anything productive. I was kind of like going through like community college and not really that particular year, just not really feeling it. And this, in here, Prince is, whether he's in Sunset Sound or, wherever he is at that point on any given day, the new house on Galpin Road or whatever was happening, while most of us were just kind of goofing off, this man was working constantly, and had people around him, Lisa and Wendy and Sheila E. and Jill Jones. And, there's Brown Mark working with Maserati. There's David Z working with Jill Jones on vocals and stuff. And it's like, and while a lot of us at that time, considered ourselves, whether it was budding musicians, budding songwriters, budding artists, whatever, it's like, we were just playing musicians. They were living musicians. So, I mean, that is impressive enough. And this, even compared to other artists, with maybe the exception of Stevie Wonder and maybe Jimi Hendrix, most other artists are like, okay, well, we're in the studio 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 months, maybe a year. And the amount of material created for an album, you might just get just the album, couple of, 3, 4, 5 extra tracks that didn't make the album, and that's it. Here, just in, with 6 months of 1985 alone, there's enough material to fill, half a dozen albums. So that is, that is impressive to really get that detail. You're really taken on a journey with this book. And I mean a real journey. Like I said, it was July of 1985. I was exhausted because it was like, wow, they just, between January and April, they were winding down the Purple Rain tour. Prince and the Revolution was winding down the Purple Rain tour. And then now you're making plans for Under the Cherry Moon. And you work, the process for Romance 1600. That album was just beginning. Around the World in a Day was in the can, and that had yet to be released. Or it was just coming out. And then before that, you had the infamous incident after the American Music Awards, and then that was the kind of the beginning of the backlash where, Prince was no longer the favorite because, he should have been at the recording session for We Are the World. And it's like, nah, instead of hiding out at home or in the hotel, it was like, nah, I'm going to go party. And there were the growing pains and the consequences of all of that. And then out of that comes For the Tears in Your Eyes, and the way he was being treated by the press, maybe some of the backlash from critics, things of that nature. That still weighed on his brain a few months later, and bam, here comes the song Hello to address that. So, I mean, it's, and again, that's just a couple of months in 1985. And you get to Parade, that era, just, putting that album together and filming the movie and pre-production, post-production, taking over the job as director, first-time movie director, first time editing a movie, first time actually doing a sort of a musical score, and growing pains for that. It's heavy. Another factor that I enjoy is that this book puts Prince in probably the most accurate context because the focus is on just the music. It opens with Prince transforming from underground rock star to superstar, and all of the baggage and success, highs and lows that come with that. You've heard me mention previous episodes. He is one of the few to attain that level of stardom that none of us will ever begin to try to understand. This book puts a lot of that in perspective, and it kind of gives you through this journey of what that does to him or what it turns him into, and kind of affects our perception of how we've seen that evolve over the next few decades. And what I enjoy about Duane's work on both the previous volume and this volume is that he's taken the time to do the research and interviews. And what that does, it gives us a deeper dive into those milestones by having the research and the interviews speak organically along with the day and date of the event. So, he doesn't, or I put it this way, he does an excellent job of not interjecting his opinion, and he allows the narrative to unfold for us so we can enjoy the experience, or we can follow the experience or follow the narrative, without the author's intrusion. It's like, hey, here's the facts of what happened on this date. Here's the perspective of the people that were actually there. And that's sort of juxtaposed in a lot of cases with Prince's own words in reflection, or maybe not direct reflection on a specific day, but a commentary or his commentary on that particular era, or the effect that he wanted the music to have in relationship to whether the people around him or what he wanted the audience to feel, or again, depending on what was happening at that moment. But all of that works very well together. It's like actually reading a documentary. I wouldn't mind seeing an actual documentary on this particular era, using this book as sort of the template, sort of the guide on how to put together an actual documentary of this period. I don't think that you would. I know we have a Prince documentary in the works, and depending on how that's going to end up, I don't know if it's going to be 2 parts, 3 parts, 6 parts, 7 parts, or whatever. But if it is sort of a episodic event of, say, 6 or 7 episodes, and you have one episode on the Parade Sign of the Times era, then definitely, if Duane isn't involved as part of the research regarding the documentary as a whole, then I think he should be. Because again, like I said, this was like, in my brain, it was like watching a documentary, but I'm reading it in a book. And I mean, it takes you on that journey. I can't say that enough, too. God, Parade is the connective tissue of the book. I mean, you have, over the course of both Parade and Sign of the Time era sessions, Sheila at this point will have 2 albums in the can ready to go. She was also given the opportunity to work on some stuff independently. That was something, reading the liner notes, and especially with a lot of the protege acts, it does get a little sketchy, because where there are times when Prince was involved, but his name isn't on it. There's times when he wasn't involved, where he was involved and his name wasn't on it. And if he wasn't involved, his name's on it. The details get a little fuzzy depending on the protege act. But this puts all that in perspective, where it's like, okay, it's Prince and Sheila in the studio. Okay, Prince wrote this song. Here are the guide vocals. Sheila, go. Or here's the bare bones of the song. Okay, Sheila, you go finish it up. Or you remix it. You do this. Oh, you got a couple of songs on your own. Let me listen to them. Okay, change that line. Do this, do that, whatever. So that was something, you get that sort of dive as to what was really going on. And it makes you want to go back and listen to those tracks like, oh, okay, that's what was happening when that was put together. Like I said, Parade is sort of the connective tissue of the book. because you have Prince and the Revolution on one hand, and then at the end there's no more revolution, and it's like Prince putting distance between maybe not necessarily the album, maybe the album a little bit, but both the movie and the revolution. It was like after a while it was, putting the end to that, and then trying to recapture a lot of his one-man band sort of vibe. To me, where, again, the book starts off with the recording of the Romance 1600 albums, and while we do get glimpses not only into the recording of Sheila E.'s albums, but just kind of her mindset, where you see that transition from protege act to band member, the whole Sign of the Times Love Sexy band being formed later. But to me, the more fascinating story when it came to the protege acts, the better story was the Jill Jones album. I don't want to get into, again, spoilers, but let's put it this way. We love that album, or a lot of us love the Jill Jones album. And as much as we love it, and as much as we understand that for most opinions, it did sort of come out a year and a half too late to have a major impact, and that album definitely deserved to have a major impact. And there are reasons behind it. Why it did take so long, and sort of the attitudes regarding it. But I'll let you read that. We'll go more in depth, once the book is released, and kind of go into more spoiler territory at that point. But to me, as far as the sort of subplots or, other stories that were going on other than the main story, to me, that was one of the most fascinating stories, is the recording of that album and basically what it took and why it took so long to finally come to fruition. The Sign of the Times era is also impressive, with just the amount of music. Again, we're talking about Sheila's third album coming into this, the finishing touches on Jill's album. Then you kind of going into overdrive with the putting together of the Sign of the Times album, and also Madhouse. So it's like, again, just like with the Purple Rain volume, you had Prince working on Sheila E.'s first album, the Times Ice Cream Castles album, Apollonia 6, the beginnings of the Family album, the beginnings, well, actually the recording of Around the World in a Day. It was practically done in the middle of the tour. That's amazing. So when we talk about, as a collective, Prince and the Vault and all of this stuff, these are sort of the highlights of the Vault legend. While you may have a interest in even later eras of Prince, and there's tons of unreleased material regarding each of those eras. I mean, we're getting a Welcome to America album representing 2011. And while we're excited and fascinated about that, it's just that once upon a time, we did not know a Vault. Actually, it wasn't until 1986 that us fans discovered that there was a Vault, and it was based on that Electrifying Mojo interview. And once we heard that, and at the time, it was estimated that there were about 320 songs in the Vault, and as fans, we went like, what? 300? What do they sound like? And that sort of started the speculation. So to be in the middle of that and knowing what was still coming, because that was done June 7th, that was 1986. So you still had the rest of 86 and everything after to come. And that myth and legend of the Vault just snowballed. And this is why we have 2 volumes dedicated to the vault now. This is why we have a Duane Tudhal now putting together the research. Props even to Per Nielsen too. They work together on Uptown Magazine, and that research, that fan dedication, that just fueled our appetite. So, here we are now in 2021, and, we're now getting these not only glimpses into the vault, but now we're getting pieces of that vault into our own record collections officially, thanks to the Prince estate. So, this is an exciting time to borrow from the Matrix. Exciting time. But again, that journey, this volume, it takes you literally around the world. The second half of the parade tour, filming of the Under the Cherry Moon film, the parade tour, buying the Galpin Road house, building the studio in it, and then once it was ready to be moved into, again, the beginnings of the Dream Factory or Sign of the Times, Crystal Ball, Camille, you name it. Those seeds were planted at the Galpin Road house. Also Sunset Sound. Paisley Park was under construction at this stage. Man, this makes Stevie Wonder and Tupac look lazy. Just what's going on. Again, the amount of recording, the songs that were, that ended up being vault legends. Songs, rehearsals that we hear about that became legendary. The first legendary after shows. Let's see, what else have we got? We've got, there's a lot of stuff that we'll be just putting on our wish list for the estate. Once you read it, and you'll read about an after show or something, and it's like, you want to hear that. Or you'll hear about a jam session. Like one in particular, and this isn't really a spoiler, but one with, there was Andre Simone and Jody Watley. This is at Sunset Sound. Andre and Jody are recording the first Jody Watley solo album, and Prince was in another studio working on stuff, and had Eric and I forget who else, maybe the beginnings of the Sign of the Times band, Sheila on drums, and Andre was invited to come over and play bass. You got Jill Jones and Jody Watley on vocals. Okay, we need that released. That could be a standalone. We talked about, I think it was last week, last week we talked about the possibility of having the estate create, or the idea of having the estate create a website direct to consumer that just deals with stuff for the fan base. That could be just a little standalone CD. Us fans will turn up with our purple ducats online to get something like that. Forget about the mainstream. We don't need them. We want this for ourselves. This is for us. So something like that, having that in our collections. So there's a lot of stuff in there you'll read about. There's even tracks that didn't end up on the Sign of the Times Super Deluxe. There may be stuff that'll end up, on a Parade Super Deluxe. It makes more sense now why some of the vault tracks that feel very Prince and the Revolution era has that vibe. There's a reason why this material is on the Sign of the Times Super Deluxe. I do get that now. I know I was very critical of that fact early on upon release. But now, having read this, I have a better understanding of why these songs were picked to be included. Again, there's one or two omissions, but I have a better appreciation and understanding of the song selection for that, thanks to reading this book now. Let's see what else. I mean, there is so much to cover. Like, this is why this is taking an entire episode on just even a non-spoiler review. But let's see what else. Going through my notes here. So we talked about the amount of recording during this period. Legendary after shows. Like I said, your wish list will be absolutely amazing. This book is also a masterclass in creative diversity, because you have Parade, Prince's exploring film scoring, based on being influenced by filming in France, old classic Hollywood movies. You have also the Flesh sessions, also meeting Miles Davis during this period. So that kind of fueled more of his jazz explorations later on. Again, it's not just a document of studio sessions. It gives us a glimpse into the world of Prince and the effects that this period had on him, as well as those around him. A lot of what goes on in this book, hey, if you're familiar with the story of Fleetwood Mac, there are portions of this book that are definitely in comparison to that. I mean, you have love triangles, relationships with the band, as far as, tensions within the band. Some of it due to, his romantic relationships. I mean, he was engaged at that point, and there's, again, there's triangles and the whole bit. A lot of tensions and things going on that would influence him to actually put an end to the revolution. I've also learned more about Sheila E.'s albums. I've learned more about Maserati's album. More than what we've known before. So there's a lot of clarity, not just from Brown Mark's perspective, but also, there are facts as to what was going on with a lot of the songs that became the Maserati album. So definitely check, be on the lookout for that and check for that as you're reading. There's clarity on the end of the Parade era and the beginning of the Sign of the Times era. What he actually gets from other musicians around him. And, there is a difference, because you had Wendy and Lisa. They were kind of based more in Los Angeles in their youth. So that particular sound and influence was a factor on a lot of the Revolution era songs. Then you get to the Sign of the Times era band. A lot of them came up out of Oakland. I mean, Oakland definitely represents, Sly and the Family Stone. Of course, Larry Graham was in Sly and the Family Stone, but hey, then later Graham Central Station, Tower of Power. Later on in the 80s, you had Digital Underground, Tupac. Oakland, definitely brought the funk. And that had a huge influence on Prince. So having, musicians come from that area and having been influenced by those same factors is why you kind of have that little darker, funkier edge, with the Sign of the Times material. I encourage everyone to read the epilogue of this book. It's not just a summary of the book, but it's also kind of a message to the fan base. I call this, or I call all of us, the Prince musical singularity, because not all of us are, I would say, the type of fan, as Prince would say, fan is shorthand for fanatic. And yeah, we get possessive of certain eras. We get possessive over certain albums. We get possessive over certain protege acts or albums, things of that nature. And, at the end of the day, like I said, Prince was an artist, one of the few, that had the luxury of decades, that had the luxury of longevity, and the luxury of a body of work to where, like a Miles Davis, a lot of people didn't dig Miles Davis when he started getting into more of the funk, when he started kind of leaning towards James Brown and Jimi Hendrix and Sly and the Family Stone. They kind of wanted that kind of blue era material. Some didn't like the sort of crossover period in the 80s. A lot of people didn't, they either dug his last album, which kind of had more hip hop influence. Some people dug it, some people didn't. But that's the beauty of having longevity. So after you go through this amazing, fascinating journey, definitely stick around for the epilogue of this book, because I do think it makes a lot of valid points. And I'll just end the non-spoiler review with kind of a piggyback on that epilogue, or my personal thoughts on the epilogue. And it just breaks down like this. Yes, Prince is a genius, but he needed, and sometimes dependent on, those other musicians, whether it was Morris Day for the Time material, Sheila E., another great drummer, Wendy and Lisa, great songwriters, arrangers, composers, Jill Jones, great singer. At the end of the day, whether it's them, the Revolution, New Power Generation, whatever your favorite configuration is, your favorite protege act, your favorite Prince wife, your favorite Prince girlfriend, or whoever, all of those, at the end of the day, they are just people. They are people. Regardless of what you and I think of specific side projects or eras or bands, they are talented people who were close and had a relationship that was very real. While we now try to understand that reality versus our perceptions based on how his music made us feel, while it's okay to have opinions or feelings about any aspect of Prince's life, that shared experience of Prince and his band members and the various emotions attached to each experience is very real, and only the parties involved knows what really went down. We can only base Prince's perspective on said events based on the songs. That was his chosen form of communication. And to kind of stay with the Star Wars analogy consistent throughout this episode, the truth is held from a certain point of view. And we can't judge someone's experience because the music made us feel a certain way. They all loved him, and there's no doubt about that. And no relationship is perfect, whether it's friends, family, work relationships, whatever. You all know what we've been through it all. We've all been through the ringer in some way, shape, or form, whether it's your working conditions, whether it's your living conditions, whether it's a family or friend relationships. We've all had ups, downs. We've been the dumpers. We've been the dumpies. We've all been through the game of life together. It's just that they get to play it out in the world of music and entertainment. But at the end of the day, they were blessed to have known Prince as close as they have and got to share experiences that we can only read about. I'm glad this book exists because it not only entertains, it informs and educates. And to me, Duane Tudhal has officially become the John McDermott, Eddie Kramer, and Mark Lewison of the Prince musical singularity. So, by all means, if you are a Prince fan, regardless of era, the other biographies are cool. Some are better than others. And to me, those are great starting points, especially if you're new to the world of Prince. By all means, check those out. Or, if you want me to do a recommendation on the best ones, I might do an episode on that. But in addition to that, the absolute must-haves for your Prince bibliography would be the Parade Era Sessions, Sign of the Times Era Sessions, 1985 to 1986, and also go get the Purple Rain Era Sessions as well. Those two books must be on your shelf if you are a Prince fan. So, that being said, Purple Rain Era Sessions is the Star Wars A New Hope. Parade / Sign of the Times Era Sessions are the Empire Strikes Back. So, Duane, go ahead and bring us that Love Sexy Era Session so we can have our Return of the Jedi and complete this trilogy. And this is kind of literally the middle trilogy almost. After that, just come out with the Love Sexy book. And then after that, you can do whatever era sessions you want after that. You could do the prequel trilogy from For You to 1999 or whatever. Give us 3 books covering those eras. If you want to do a sequel trilogy, you can start it with Batman. I don't know. Start with Batman or start with Graffiti Bridge or whatever. And, if you want to do Artificial Age era next, do that too. But definitely go ahead, because I'm really ready for the rest of the story, because you're really not done with Sign of the Times. Yeah, the album is finished and configured and is awaiting approval for release by this point. But, there's still a couple of B-sides. There's still the Sign of the Times tour. But, I have faith in his narrative. So he's going to bring the funk, whatever the next volume. I'm hoping it is Love Sexy Era. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, hint, hint, hint. Go and drop that. So, once the book does come out, instead of doing just a straight spoiler review, what I will do is touch on a lot of sort of my favorite points of the book. Just stuff that I enjoyed, as well as projects I would like to see the Prince Estate eventually release based on a lot of stuff that I've read in the book. So I'll do that. Let me check the calendar here. So June 10th is on a Thursday. So Monday the 14th, that episode of Amari Purple Talk would be the spoiler review for the Parade / Sign of the Times era sessions. And like I said, just some major takeaways from the book where I can discuss the spoilers in depth. Like I said, just kind of discuss a lot of the projects that I would like to see. There's a couple of songs in there that are still in the vault that I'm sure not a lot of us have heard of, that we have yet to hear, and that didn't make it on anything that's come out so far. Maybe some of it will be on a Parade Super Deluxe, we hope. But there's other stuff too that deserves to be a standalone release, where there could be a mainstream, or again, proposing the idea, estate, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, hint, hint, that, come out with a direct-to-consumer model or a record store day thing. We would like to check that out. So that will be next week's, or not next week's, that'll be June 10th or June 14th's episode of Amari Purple Talk. But that's going to end this episode. And once again, I'd like to thank you all for sharing your time by listening to this episode. You can also Continue your support for Amari Purple Talk by either purchasing Amari Communications merchandise that has items including but not limited to Amari Purple Talk t-shirts, mugs, masks, and also those very funky We Funk to the Last Beat, to the Last Bass, to the Last Band t-shirts. Or you can make a Cash App donation for any amount you wish. Links are in the show notes or in the button in the Amari Communications channel banner on YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, please continue to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and check us out next week. Until then, be safe, be peaceful, be wild, create your day, and then create your life. Keep it purple and on the one.